La Solidaridad prospered, two-thirds of its distribution being to the Philippines, one-third to Spain and elsewhere. The paper had a more substantial backing than any the Filipinos had yet produced. Its dissemination quickly provoked reaction in various newspapers and periodicals in Spain. Later, the more valuable criticism organized its own mouthpiece, La Política de España en Filipinas, a periodical founded in 1891 with the express purpose of confuting La Solidaridad, edited by Jose Faced and Wenceslao Retana. But Retana turned out to be one of the friars' arch supporters. There is even a suggestion that the friars were actually supporting La Política de España financially. However, La Solidaridad can with justice be said to have provoked the audience it was aimed at. It found a fair amount of active opposition, and it certainly had a considerable influence on liberal opinion. The degree to which it found its mark, too, is revealing. When Rizal published his Morga edition, even Morga himself, more than 2 centuries dead, was involved in contumely, both Morga and Rizal being condemned as un-Spanish. Under the title Filipinas Dentro de 100 Años, a fairly long work which appeared by installments in La Solidaridad during the last months of the year when he was in Paris, Rizal surveyed, among other matters, the political chances of the Philippines being able to stand on their own as an independent country, taking into consideration the aims and possible attitudes of neighboring states in Asia and of the foreign powers with interest in the East. Since his second departure from the Philippines, he had begun to speak and think more freely about complete independence, and despite La Solidaridad's policy of assimilation, he expressed his more radical views in the periodical, as he put it in its simplest form. If a colonizing nation cannot bring happiness to her colonies, she must either abandon them or give them their liberty. More and more, it seemed to him, things pointed to revolution. In May 1889, his friend Pardo de Tavera, who had earlier gone to Manila with the intention of working there, returned to Paris saying that life in the Philippines was becoming impossible and forecasting that unless conditions improved, within 10 years there would be a serious revolution. It was a confused thinking of the medieval twilight, but it was taking form. To the Spaniards, it spelled danger. 1889 marked the issue from Madrid of 2 important decrees concerning the Philippines. The first was on July 31, making the civil code applicable to the islands. The second was on November 12, known as the Becerra Law, introducing in the main towns of the Philippines a substantial measure of local self-government on the basis of elections. The propaganda movement now had its own secret organization in Manila, looking after the distribution of La Solidaridad and other pamphlets, raising funds, and keeping in close touch with Barcelona. By June, the temperamentally undisciplined Lopez Haina was pulling his weight less and less as editor of La Solidaridad. Del Pilar was practically editing the paper, and a week or so later, he took over entirely. In September, Del Pilar came up himself to meet Rizal, whom he informed of his plans to move La Solidaridad to Madrid and make it into a weekly. Rizal had recently become a Freemason. Evidence of the influence which the methods of Masonry had on him appears almost at once with his formation in Paris of a Filipino organization called the Indios Bravos, dedicated to the idea of courage. Within it, however, was a secret inner group which, beneath the concealment of the code letters RDLM, was pledged to the liberation of the Malay people from colonial rule, a pledge to be made good first in the Philippines, later to be extended to the inhabitants of Borneo, Indonesia, and Malaya. On his Paris visit, Del Pilar became a member of this inner group, another member being Basa in Hong Kong. In January 1890, Antonio de Morga's Sucesos de las Islas Filipinas, newly brought to light and annotated by Jose Rizal with a preface by Blumentritt, was published in Spanish by Garnier Freres in Paris. The bulk of the copies were sent to Basa in Hong Kong, who made himself responsible for seeing that they reached the propaganda in Manila in such quantities as were requested. And within a month or two, the author had the satisfaction of learning that the book was much in demand, selling at double its published price. At about the same time as the Sucesos, he published his Tagalog orthography. Blumentritt had already translated Noli Me Tangere into German, and he now translated the orthography, which is a condensed version, appeared also in Dutch. At this point and into this atmosphere, there now steps a woman, but a woman rather different from those he thereto encountered. Nelly Busted. Nelly Busted considered herself a Filipina. She was nonetheless very like her English grandfather, Eduardo Busted, son of one of the most famous of Britain's East India merchants. She was more handsome than beautiful. Of all the women in Rizal's life, she was the closest to him in character. By this time, it seemed to Rizal's friends that he was very interested in her.